Okay. Interview with John Gallagher of Raven, second part. So we are on the album Wiped Out. On this album, we also find the song Star Wars. Is it about the movie and the destruction of Alderaan?
No, not
No?
really. I think there was a lot of, you know, popular culture. Don't quite know how we got away with that. Star Wars, Star War. It was just, I guess, a little story Rob came up with that was, like a sci-fi battle thing, not really related to the movie at all. And we we had the music, and I think it must have just sparked off that lyrical idea on him. Uh, it was always a fun song to play, lots of twists and turns, and heavy too. I always liked singing it. It was fun doing it again back in 22 when we did the full album. It was cool.
Okay. And just to know it about the movie Star Wars, do you have a favorite episode?
Well, I remember going to the movies to see the third one, The Empire. It's what's the third one? It's not The Empire Strikes Back.
A New Hope.
Yeah, we saw it in Holland. Funnily enough, we had to spend a week between gigs, and they had us in a chalet out in the middle of nowhere. And our tour manager complained bitterly, "Get us the fuck out of here, Harry. There's nothing but ducks." So we ended up in Nijmegen, and we found out that the movies that were on were all in English and they were just subtitled in Dutch. So we ended up going to the movies and Star Wars, there you go.
Okay, and the song Chainsaw, is it about the movie Chainsaw Massacre?
Which song?
Chainsaw, the last song of Wiped Out. Chainsaw.
Oh, Chainsaw.
Chainsaw, okay.
Yeah. No, that's again just another crazy lyric about someone who's fed up with a girlfriend who want to chop them up into little pieces. And it's such a fun song to play. It's been currently the last song we play in our set right now for quite a while, because it's so crazy. It's just like, that's it. You don't get no crazier than that. Boom. That's all you're getting. And in the studio at the end, it's complete mayhem. We're throwing everything around, hitting stuff, and at the end, me and Rob play the piano together at the same time, playing two different songs, which is really ridiculous. Chopsticks, dun 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 dun, and I'm going dun 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 dun.
Mm-hmm.
Very silly. The amazing thing about those sessions is almost everything is live. There's very few overdubs. I remember the song "Hold Back the Fire" with a guitar solo, and Mark standing on top of the piano, jumping up and down while he's playing the solo. It's crazy, crazy, crazy.
Okay, so 1983, the EP Break the Chains, followed by the album All for One, then Live at Inferno in 1984. I know you talked about many times, but can you tell us about your collaboration with Udo Dirkschneider?
Yeah, well, what had happened is before we did Wiped Out, we did a Radio 1 session down in London at Maida Vale Studios. And that kind of blew our mind as to what a real studio looked like, and working with a real producer, Tony Wilson, who was the BBC guy. And it was so much fun and so easy. And we're already kind of contracted to do the next album at Neat Records at the bare bones studio. But we said, that's it. once we've done that, if we're doing a third album with them, we're not doing it there. We're going to go to a real studio with a real producer. And that's what happened. We had an ultimatum and said, nope, we want this guy, the guy who did Accept Breaker. And it turned out the guy who actually did all the real work was Michael Wagner. I was like, well, that's the guy we want. And then it turned out that Michael was working on a production partnership with Udo from Accept. Now, we'd met Udo. We played with Accept in '82, I think on the first date of the Restless and Wild tour. So we certainly knew and loved Accept's music and said, yeah, great, bring him on. So that was the first time we'd really done pre-production with an outside voice. So we rented time at Ronnie Pearson had a drum shop. Ronnie Pearson was the drummer who played with Sting in a band called Last Exit before Sting left to London. He had a drum shop in a large basement where you could rehearse. So we went in there for a week with Michael and Udo, and they'd sit and make notes and come up with some ideas, change this, change that, make this shorter, longer, what have you. And then we went down to London to a suburb called Southall. There was a studio there called Pineapple Studios, which was a step up from Neat, absolutely. And we just worked like Trojans, 13, 14-hour days for nearly 3 weeks getting that done. And it was fantastic. It was just the best time. We had so much fun and learned so much from Michael. He was, just wonderful and a funny guy. They say Germans don't have senses of humor. That German has a sense of humor, let me tell you. And Udo couldn't really speak much English at the time, but once he got drunk, he was very funny, that's for sure. And we just told him, you're singing on 2 songs with us, whether you like it or not. So we did Born to Be Wild and we did Inquisitor, and they turned out great,
Status quo. Okay.
I still remember doing the Ballad of Marshall Stack, which had the dun 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 bit in the middle, and they'd taken 2-inch tape and made headdresses, and we're going in the control room while we were playing, and we all fell apart laughing. It was too silly. And Michael was crazy. We'd go. He had his Porsche 928. And the engineer had a car, and they'd be racing each other every time we'd go anywhere. Like we'd go out for lunch, and Michael would just park his car anywhere, and police would come up and go, "Hello, sir, license and registration," and he'd go like, "What is license? My name is Fritz. I don't," and the policeman would go away, go away, go away. He'd just pretend he couldn't speak English. It was so silly.
Okay, so then it's the famous Kill 'Em All for One tour with Metallica. You talked about many times too. So I just would like to know, what memories do you keep about Cliff Burton as a person and as a bassist?
Cliff was like an old soul on young shoulders. That's how I describe it. He was much more mature than the other guys. He was a great player, great musician. He knew his stuff. We would sit quite often, bass guitar in hand, and go, "What do you think of this? What do you think of that?" And do weird chords like this. Can I remember it? Like, oops, is that the one? No. It's an Alan Holdsworth chord, which means, crazy. And we try to do it on bass and figure out which note was which and what have you. And you know, he'd had his secret weapon. He had a pickup hidden in the bridge of his Rickenbacker that nobody could see, which was cool. And he was very stubborn. He wore the same trousers for an entire tour. I think he took them off once. They must have stunk. And he had that wonderful way of headbanging that had nothing to do with the music. He'd been a different beat to everybody else. So very talented guy, absolutely. And, you know, the only other guy I'd ever ran into who wanted to play bass solos. I was playing a bass solo, he was playing a bass solo. And we played in Texas, and the opening band had a bass player who played a bass solo. And the three of us got together and said, this will never happen again. You'll never see that. But no, we got on well. He was a very cool guy and a very sad loss. Yeah.
Okay. So, as we know it, Raven is among the influences of Metallica. Do you think there are some parts on Metallica's album directly influenced by Raven, and which ones?
Yeah, I think Lars is a very, very smart guy, and he put himself. You know what they say. You got to put yourself in a position of people who know more than you do. Always to learn, to grow, and they did that. They were very green. It was their first tour. They watched. I mean, Lars and James have told me they watched every night and said, "How do we get from here to there? That's where you want to get from there, and then keep going, right?" So, and they also said they loved the All for One album because it broadened what we did without losing who we were. And they wanted to do that on their next album. And they did. Ride the Lightning did that. Because Kill 'Em All was one thing, and Ride the Lightning gave them the ability to do, Fade to Black, the classical intro, the instrumental that they did. They call it Kahutu, whatever it's called. And they had the ability to broaden their palette. And it's still hard and heavy, but it's not pure or down the line thrash. Very few songs on that album really are. They'd moved on from that. So that was definitely showed that they'd listened to what we'd done, took a little part of it with many other people and made it their own and moved forward, which is what you got to do.
Okay. So, 1985, the album Stay Hard and the first video clip for On and On. We see the band going around a records label to get a deal. Did this music video bring you a bigger audience?
Yeah, I think it's hilarious. It was done for comedy. There's a lot of bad videos out there from that time, and we wanted to just send it up and be silly. Obviously, our stage costumes are pretty silly by the end of it, but the whole thing of dressed in rags, trying to get a record deal, and then we come back in, throw the guy out the window. That was all. It was a long day, let me tell you. That was like 24 hours all the way through. It took forever. It was crazy. But the album was the next step from All for One. A lot of the songs could have fit on it. Unfortunately, we didn't get Michael Wagner in until halfway through, because we knew the mixes on the few songs we had weren't cutting it. It didn't sound good enough. We were working with our live sound engineer, who was a genius at live sound, but it sounded flat in the studio. So we brought Michael in to re-record a couple of songs and to mix, and he obviously made it better. But you've got to start from the start to get it to sound exactly the way we wanted it. So didn't sound quite as good as All for One, but it still sounded good. And we were happy with the songs. It wasn't until the next album that the record company really started to push us in a more commercial direction. But Stay Hard, the songs were great to play live. And there's a bootleg to radio broadcast from Detroit in 1985, and you can hear how good the songs are on that. Yeah.
Okay. So on this album, you recorded a new version of Hard Ride. Can you explain why?
Yeah, the record company, that was their one push, is they wanted a version of Hard Ride. They wanted that on there. And funnily enough, about a few years later, and I didn't find this out for 30 years, Samantha Fox, the girl with the big kazumbas that used to be in the Sun newspaper in England, who had a music career, did a cover of Hard Ride.
Okay.
Which is terrible. It's awful.
The one who sing boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You're giving me a hard time. Yeah, so the version we did on Stay Hard is, homogenized. It's slowed down. There's a little bit cut out. And it's like, it's nowhere near as good. It's nowhere near as fun, But we felt if that was the compromise we needed to keep the record company happy, okay, fair enough. It's just that one song. Everyone's heard it the way it was, and if they like it, great, and if they don't, well, there's another 9 songs to listen to.
Okay. So on this album, we also found the song When the Going Get Tough. If I understand well, you talked to hunt down a guy. Is it fictive or did you have someone in mind?
No, it's like a detective story, the lyrics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what that's all about. And another funny thing about that was we owed the publishing company lots of money years later because they'd given us a large advance. And I kept getting these statements saying we owed all this money. And then it started going down. I'm like, how come? It turned out they were paying us the royalties for Billy Ocean's When the Going Gets Tough by accident.
Okay.
They went, oops, and then took it all back again. We never actually saw the money. It was just paying down the debt, But so whenever I hear that song, it makes me laugh.
Okay. So at this period, Mark and you gave an interview to Bruce Dickinson. It's on Raven's YouTube channel. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, we just recorded the Pack Is Back album, which was 2-3 weeks of pre-production, and then 6 weeks in the studio, and then a month in the mixing studio. So you can see we're fried. We're like out of it. And MTV wanted Bruce to interview us, and it was at a fencing club in Manhattan. I remember that. And Bruce was great. He's always up, a lot of fun, and great respect to Bruce. He's one of the few guys that is 110% on stage every time. I got to give him that. He's fantastic, fantastic. And a fun guy, interesting guy to talk to. So that's really all I remember from that. And when I look back at those videos, it's funny because we're half asleep, and also our accents are very strong. It's hard to understand.
Okay. So you released The Pack Is Back in March 1986. If I understand well, Atlantic wanted a soft and commercial musical direction, and they made you promises they didn't keep. Can you talk about?
Yeah, it was you know, there was a lot of pressure on the management and on the producer, Eddie Kramer. And none of it made sense. You have a band whose forte was playing live and being, you know, crazy and adventurous. And let's strip that down and make it homogenized and commercial. Let's take a producer whose forte is bringing the live experience into the studio, you know, Jimi Hendrix, Kiss, Led Zeppelin, and make him act like Mutt Lange, you know? Play it again, play it again, play it again, play it to a click track, blah, 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 blah. So it's actually amazing it turned out as well as it did. For us, it was a learning experience. We didn't want to record like that anymore. We didn't want to record that long anymore. And we didn't want people telling us what to do anymore. Because at the end of the day, we had all these big plans for a video, and the record company just said, nope, you're not getting any money. We're like, what? Seriously? Nope. Okay. And that's when we had a meeting and said, to hell with this. We want to do an EP showing what the band really sounds like, which was the Mad EP. And then we were going to go on tour with Twisted Sister. They just put out, or were just putting out, Come Out and Play. And that was going to be the big thing. And of course, that was their Pack Us Back. That was a big problem for them. They cancelled the tour 2 weeks before it started or something, you know. We'd already paid for tour buses and everything, and it was like a big nightmare. And we had to quickly put together a headline tour to go out, otherwise we would have lost our shirts with all the amount of money we'd already spent preparing for the tour. So that made us hate Atlantic even more, you know.
Okay. So about this album, do you think it could be interesting to release a new version we recorded nowadays in the true style of Raven?
It's something we've talked about doing for, you know, for fun, even if it's just somehow put out just for the fans, just as an alternate view, because there's good songs on there. And
Yes.
some of the songs are done well on the album. Generally, the slower ones, like Rock Dogs, is done well. The Pack Us Back is done well. Nightmare Ride was changed from the demo. The bridge before the chorus is different. I prefer the way it was. But songs like Hyperactive could sound good. Youngblood is a good song. We actually played Youngblood live quite a few times. It was fun. Had you know, that kind of jazz breakdown was always a lot of, you know, was fun to play. And just to my mind, the lyrics are very much of the time. It's very much teen movie, you know, good girl, bad girl nonsense. So it's a little cheesy for sure. So who knows? You know, Mike gets his new studio fixed up and we have time to waste. We might do that. Might do it.
Okay. So 1986, the Mad EP, the talk about that, followed by Life's a Beach in 1987. Rob Hunter leaves the band to get married, if I understand well. It seems he then produced some hardcore bands and now produced some jazz bands. Do you have sometimes news about him?
Yeah, well, you know, Rob did play in a few bands upstate New York and then ended up working with Branford Marsalis, the jazz sax player, you know, famously played with Sting on his first solo albums. And, you know, I didn't hear from Rob for about 5 or 6 years. There was a business thing came up. I got him on the phone. We talked for 3 hours. And, you know, he basically said he had some demons, you know, he was drinking too much. He was doing other stuff. He was married. He had a kid on the way, and he didn't want everything to fall apart. So for himself and his family, he had to quit, you know, and perfectly understandable, you know. You know, we were young guys. He basically quit by telling the roadie to tell the manager to tell us, you know, it's dysfunctional. So we were mad. We weren't happy about it. But, you know, you look back and it's just like, guy had to do what he had to do. It's not a problem. And we've been, you know, friends ever since, still through. But we never met up until 2 years ago. We were in New Orleans on tour, and he was scouting out a location and setting it up for a live Branford recording. And he came to the sound check, and we sat for 3 hours and talked. That's the first time we'd been together in 37 years. And it was like a day later. So it was great. It was really, you know, it was a long time coming. It was a real full circle moment. It was great. But yeah, Rob quit the band, and we were, you know, stuck in America with no means of making money, no money. It was tough for a good 6-7 months until we decided to try the guy that was basically half the time living in the same house that we were, Joe Hasselvander. And, you know, Joe, very talented, great drummer, plays guitar, had the same influences. It was a no-brainer, you know. So we brought him in and then started working on, you know, we'd written a lot of songs, so we had to get in the studio.
So, okay, Joe, nothing exceeds like excess in 1988 marked the entrance of Joe Hasselvander. But he played before in Pentagram and several doom bands. How did he adapt to the style of Raven?
Well, we were living at this house that was owned by a couple of sisters. They called it Rock and Roll Hotel. You know, they had a lot of bedrooms, and, you know, people from various bands had been there for a while. Metallica had been there for a while when they were writing Ride the Lightning. We were there the longest. Excite had been there for a while. The band Savoy Brown with Kim Simmons, they had a version of that called the Kim Simmons Band, and Joe was playing drums with them. And they stayed there off and on. They were there. So we met Joe, and, you know, Joe was this crazy guy who would be listening to cassette tapes of Godzilla and playing Mark Bolan riffs and playing the Groundhogs and Black Sabbath. And, you know, he was hilarious. He was a very funny guy, and we got on well with him. And so we knew Joe for 2 or 3 years before, and we tried out a couple of guys, and it did not work out at all. And somehow the idea came, why don't we ask Joe? Hey, Joe, do you want to come jam with us? So we went down to Bearsville in the studio and messed around and demoed a few things and jammed, and it was great. And we said, let's do it. We got a deal with Combat, and then we went into a little studio that I'd worked in upstate New York. I'd produced a friend's band of mine, Roy Costin. And this little studio was, you know, fine. It was perfect for what we wanted up in Utica, New York. And we were in there very quickly, maybe 2 weeks. And, you know, it wasn't the greatest sound production-wise, but the songs were really good. The playing was really good, and there was a lot of energy in it. So it was a very good first album with Joe, that's for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So on this album, it seems you were involved in the cover art of this record. can you tell what you wanted to express through this one?
Well, the title we had, just for fun, nothing exceeds like excess. We wanted a guy that was surrounded by excess and going crazy. So there's money, there's, you know, poker chips, there's weapons, there's you've even got two little ravens fighting over a necklace in the background.
Yes.
And that was, we didn't do the art. I mean, I just sketched a guy with crazy stuff around it, and they did it. And between the two of them, our then manager and ex-manager were both saying, that looks like me, or, you know, it's like, it wasn't supposed to look like anybody. But it stuck out. It was a fun cover. It did well.
Yes. Okay, so 1991, Architect of Fear, followed by the EP Heads Up. Architect is one of my favorite album. It contains a thrash metal side. Were you influenced by the bands with whom you played on the last tour?
I think we were influenced by a lot of just the whole atmosphere, and the fact that we weren't happy with the sound on Nothing Exceeds. It wasn't as heavy as it should be, so we really pushed for a heavier, darker sound. And, you know, I'm trying to think of what had happened was we were contacted by Creators Management, the band Creator from Germany, and they asked us if we would open for them playing in Europe. Now, we hadn't played in Europe in 6 or 7 years at that time. So we were very hungry to get back to play in Europe. I think the last show we played in Europe was at the end of '84. So here we were like 4 or 5 years later. And it was just like, yeah, let's do that. And it was fantastic. And we got on well with Creators Management, Bogie Kopek and Gerald Wilkes. And we said, okay, let's, we got rid of Combat because they were, you know, they didn't understand us. They were more into the hard thrash and the upcoming death metal thing. And, you know, we'd done well on that tour in Europe. So we went to Germany and we recorded Architect of Fear in a studio in Witten, which is near Dortmund, and had a wonderful time there. Engineer was great and got a really big, fat, dirty, dark sound, you know. It's very powerful. And then we went out on tour with Running Wild, who were a popular German band at the time. A fantastic tour all across Europe. You know, played Greece for the first time. And that was awesome. And then we followed that up with an EP, Heads Up, which I was the guilty party for the artwork in that one as well. I'm not guilty for the Architect of Fear cover, which nobody could come up with an idea, so they got an artist to draw a raven. Wow. Intense. Very clever. And we went out with a band called Risk opening for us. Great tour. So that would be in '92. And then I think the burgeoning grunge and new metal thing, the scourge of music, came over to Europe and made things difficult over there at that point. So that brings us to the next album.
Hello. Okay. So what time? We arrive at the end of this second part. I suggest you make a new little cut and send you a new link in about 5 minutes.
Sure, no problem.
And we'll talk about Glow.
Very good. All right. Catch you then. Send me the thing.